Question 31. We are asked to find 7% of 500. Now, one thing you need to know is if you want to work out 10% of something, you simply divide by 10. And if you want to work out 1%, you divide by 100. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to work out 1%. And to work out 1%, what we have to do is take this number 500 and divide it by 100. Now, because this ends in 2 zeros, we can simply cross off both the zeros like this. So 500 divided by 100 is 5. So 1% equals 5. If 1% is 5, 7% will be 7 times 5. And 7 times 5, if we do our 5 times table, is 35. So 7% of 500 equals 35. Question 32 is 2/6 take away 1/8, and you have two fractions. Now, if you look carefully, the denominators, the bottom number is called the denominator, and the top number is called the numerator. Now, the denominators are different, and we have to make them the same. So what I can do, if I do the 6 times table for a few multiples in there, so if I did 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, and so on. Now I do the 8 times table, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, and so on. If I go along here and here, and I look for the lowest common multiple, so I can see 24 and 24 are the first numbers in both the lists that are common. So somehow I've got to turn this 6 into a 24 and this 8 into a 24. So I've got a common denominator. So 2/6, I'm going to write that here. And how do I turn that 6 into a 24? Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4. I multiply by 4. And whatever I do to the denominator, I do to the numerator. So that's my fraction 2/6. Now I need to take away 1/8. Now the same thing, how can I turn this 8 into a 24? So if I count here, 1, 2, 3, I multiply the 8 by 3 to get 24. And whatever I do to the bottom number, I have to do to the top number. So these are my two fractions now. So let's write them here. 2 times 4 is 8. 6 times 4 we know is 24. Minus 1 times 3 is 3. And 8 times 3 is 24 again. Now our calculation's easy because the denominators are the same. So put the fraction line, put the denominator as 24, and we simply do 8 minus 3, which is 5. Now I want to do this using the bottom, right, left, the Brill method. 2/6 minus 1/8. Right, we look at the B, it stands for bottom. So what do? We start at 6 and walk across and multiply the bottom two numbers. So we have 6 times 8 at the bottom. So you've walked from here to here. So you're stood here now. So we go from bottom right to top left. So we go across, up that way. So remember your journey. Now we're doing 8 times 2. 8 times 2. And that's a minus, so we bring that across. And finally, we do the L, which is left. So it's bottom left to top right. So we go across from the bottom left up to the top right. So it'll be 6 times 1. 6 times 1. So this is our fraction. So let's go ahead and do that. 8 times 2 is 16 minus 6 times 1, which is 6. And then we have to do 6 times 8. So this is where you need to know your times tables. So let's do our 6 times tables here. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48, and so on. We want 8 lots of 6. So we want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 6 times 8 is 48. Now simply we do 16, take away 6, which is 10, divided by 48. So 10 48ths. Now I can simplify this. Let me write that word, simplify. And that simply means to make simpler. To make simpler. Or to make easier. And in this case, it just means to make these as small as possible. I can see straight away that the 10 is in the 2 times table. So I divide that by 2. And the 48 is in the 2 times table, and I divide that by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 48 divided by 2. So if I look carefully, they're both even numbers. So I can do 4 divided by 2 and 8 divided by 2. So my answer is 5/24. That's the other way of doing this, the BRL method. And it works for both plus and subtract when you're doing fractions. Question 33, we're given 0.9 times 200. So what we can do is 0.9 times 200. Now there's many ways of doing this. What we can do is turn this into a whole number. So if I move the decimal point that way to there, this number becomes 9. So this 0 can disappear. So I have 9 the decimal points there. That can disappear. So what in effect I have got is 9. So I can do 9 times 200. And what you do with these sort of questions, you hide the 2 zeros and you do 9 times 2. And 9 times 2 is 18. And then these 2 zeros that we hid, we bring them back. So 9 times 200 is 1,800. But what did we do extra here? We moved the decimal point that way once to turn it into a whole number. Now what we have to do is undo this. Now on this number here, you should know in your head that the decimal point is there. Although it's not written, it's there. And now we have to go back to undo this operation. So let's take the decimal point back. So our decimal point ends up there. So we can get rid of this. So now what we have is 180.0. And this 0.0 we don't need. So our answer is really 180. Now some people will do this question slightly differently. They will do 0.9 times. And they will split this up into 2 times 100. Because 2 times 100 is still 200. Now if we do this part, 0.9 times 2. So 0.9 and 0.9. That's another way of doing 0.9 times 2. You add the 0.9 twice. So let's do it this way. 9 add 9 is 18. We put the 8 down and we carry the 1 to the next column. 0 add 0 is 0. Plus the 1 we've carried is 1. So our answer is 1.8. So this part of the calculation is 1.8. Then we multiply it by 100. And how did we do this? 1.8. Add a few zeros here and a few zeros here. So all this is going on in your head. And whenever you multiply a number by 100, you move the decimal point to the right. You make the number bigger. How many times do you move it? 1, 2. Because you've got 2 zeros, you move the decimal point. 1, 2. So now this decimal point has ended up here. So we can get rid of this. And these 2 leading zeros we don't need, so let's get rid of them. And finally, this 0 we don't need, and this decimal point we don't need. So we are left with 180. As before. So 0.9 times 200 is 180. Now you can use any method. Whichever one you're comfortable with, you can do. Question 34, we're asked to work out 15% of 1000. And we know that 10%, we simply divide the number by 10. So we divide the number by 10. And to work out 5%, what we'll do, we'll halve 10%. So what we'll do is we'll halve 10%. So whatever we get for 10%, we just divide it by 2. So let's write that here. 1000 divided by 10. And we know when you've got a 0 at the end and you're dividing it by 10, you simply cross off the 0. So 1000 divided by 10 is 100. So now I know 10% is equal to 100. So 5% is half of that. So half of 100 we should know is 50. So 10% plus 5% here is 15%. And 100 plus 50 is 150. So I know 15% off 1000 is 150.